Hello ladies and gentlemen, you've read the title of this video, so you know what I'm going to be talking about. The ESRB has lied to parents, and it's more of a lie by omission. I don't think they're outright lying, but they're definitely leaving out important details and information that should be given to parents, and it's actually what parents might need to know about loot boxes. In fact, it's what they need to know, not even might. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, parents should be aware of what I'm going to say about loot boxes, and the ESRB and the ESA, by extension, kind of willfully ignore this information, even though they haven't disproved it, and it's pretty credible. And it is most of this information is in theory, some of it isn't. Alright, so first we'll start off and read what the ESRB thinks that we need to know about loot boxes and in-game purchases. This article was written by Patricia Vance, and she is the president of the ESRB. This was as recent as July 24th, 2019, and if we scroll down, we will read the section on loot boxes because it's pertinent to this video. Loot boxes or loot crates are like locked treasure chests that contain an array of virtual items that can be used in-game once unlocked. In some games, loot boxes can be earned through gameplay and or can be purchased using either real money or in-game currency. In most cases, you can't see the items before you make the purchase. Alright, so to start off with, as a pirate, I'm going to tell you that buying a treasure chest is about the stupidest fucking thing you can ever do. Why don't you just go out and find your treasure map and then find the treasure chest, or even better yet, steal a treasure chest from somebody else. Jokes aside, I actually not. I'm kind of like half joking about that. I think it's really fucking sleazy what the ESRB is doing here. Essentially, they're dumbing it down, and they're trying to make it seem harmless. They're treasure chests that contain virtual items. No. What they are actually is gambling, and we'll take a look at why. So let's read what else they have to say here. How can I tell if a loot box will have an item that I may want? No two loot boxes are the same, and games often incorporate loot boxes differently. Some games list which loot boxes guarantee better, rarer items. Meanwhile, other games may identify the relative rarity of individual items using standard terms, such as common, epic, legendary, a color code, and or symbols like stars. And there are drop rates, which list the probability of getting each item offered in a loot box. Some games display all the above. The problem with drop rates... Excuse me, 1 second. The problem with drop rates is that when you get into items that are less than 1%, they don't usually list how less they actually are. And it matters because that's when it gets into some of the rarest items that you can find. So you could have an item that's less than 1%, and maybe it's like 1 in 1,000 that you'll find it. But it could just as well be like 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 50,000. And it's all less than 1%. And that really matters as far as probability goes, because let me tell you, I know from shiny hunting in Pokemon, basically you could spend an entire week just looking for something that's you have a 1 in 10,000 chance of finding, and it takes a long while. And if I was having to spend money to encounter every Pokemon in that instance, it would probably rack up within probably about $10,000 as well. So this is pretty much bullshit. Understanding drop rates is simpler than it appears at first blush. No, it's not simple because you guys don't list what actually matters. The higher the drop rate or percentage displayed, the higher the probability that you'll get a rare item from a loot box. For example, if a drop rate is 25% for an epic item, that means that the player has a 25% chance of getting an epic item or better. No, it doesn't mean or better. It means exactly what it says, 25%. A drop rate of 100% or a rare item means that you'll always get a rare item or better. See, I don't know why they include the or better. I don't know if it's like supposed to be rounded up that way or something, and that's like standard in the industry, but I feel like not. And is that just about it? And then they talk about basically how to limit your child's spending. And that's literally all they say. I think that's literally all they say about loot boxes here. Which is pretty dismal. Like, do you feel you've learned a lot about loot boxes? So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you the truth about loot boxes. So if you're a parent watching this video, you know the truth and you can understand like the psychological manipulation that goes on behind loot boxes. So I wrote an article in one of my psychology classes called The Keystone of the Gambling Arc, Why Loot Boxes Are Not Considered Gambling. And basically, loot boxes aren't considered gambling because they miss out on a single fallacy. Basically, there's a paper by Nielsen and Grabarczyk, I think. I'm probably butchering his name. It's a scientific paper, and they talk about RRMs, which are random reward mechanisms. So basically, there's like 4 different types of random reward mechanisms, and they each depend whether you don't pay for the in-game currency that you get to gamble with, whether you pay for that currency but like you get a reward that you can't spend in real life, whether you're paying with real money and then getting a reward that you actually can spend and sell in real life, which is gambling, which is what's defined as gambling, or whether you can just spend money and not sell the item, which is how most loot boxes are classified. So basically, you can buy a loot box with real money, but since you can't sell the rewards for real life money, it's not gambling. And the reason that people use to justify this, and the reason that Nielsen and Grabarczyk, I guess, I'm sorry, dude, I can't pronounce your name. The reason why is because of this fallacy called the sunk cost fallacy. And it's very dangerous in gambling. Essentially, how it works is that if you are gambling, and there's a lot of people that like do this. So you're gambling, and let's say you throw $50 into the slot machine, and you kind of blow it all. You don't win anything, and you think to yourself, hey, you know what? I kind of want to win that $50 back. So you put in another $50, and you're like, damn, I lost that too. So then you put in $100 and try to make up for those 50. And so now you spend $200 on gambling, and you're like, shoot, dude, I'm not going to have enough to buy dinner tonight. But, if I play a little bit more, maybe I'll win some back. So essentially, the sunk cost fallacy, once you've invested so much in gambling, your brain is like, hey, you need to keep gambling because maybe you'll win and make up the money you've lost. And that's why gambling is so dangerous, is because of the sunk cost fallacy, because people think that they can win their money back when chances are you probably can't. And since you can't sell loot boxes, when you spend the money initially, there's no money that you can make up back. So it's not gambling, is essentially what the argument is. But the truth of the matter is that there is a sunk cost fallacy that exists just for cosmetic items. Say you want a specific cosmetic item that's in a loot box, and you keep paying to open loot boxes to get the cosmetic item. And let's say you've opened 10 loot boxes and you still haven't gotten it. You're like, man, I'm 10 loot boxes deep, but I really want this item, so I'm going to keep paying for it. So you do another 10 loot boxes, and then you still don't get it. So you're like, I'm 20 loot boxes deep. I really have to keep going for this. And so there is a sunk cost fallacy that exists also. but it's not as powerful because basically what they argue is that you can't really put a monetary value on what's inside of a loot box. There's not like a definitive monetary set value for it. And I think that's kind of a little horseshit, because you can see in like communities like Counter-Strike that like skins that you open from loot boxes have a market, and on the market those skins have a monetary value according to their rarity. Of course, there's games that don't have that kind of market, so you can't see, you know, what you could buy a skin or something for. But you know, the point still stands, especially for young kids or teens, that you know, maybe these skins mean more to them than like winning money would. Like, think of Fortnite, for example. There's that skin that you've always wanted. Well, I guess Fortnite's not the greatest example, but you're playing a video game, and like Overwatch maybe, and there's a skin that you really want, and you're a teen or something, and so you keep spending money to open loot boxes to get that skin, and that skin is worth more to you than like money would be if you were actually gambling. Now, of course, there's instances where these skins would be worth less to people, but basically that's a justification that scholars and companies use, that you know, loot boxes aren't gambling. It's because the rewards technically don't have a monetary value, so it's kind of stupid. But sunk cost fallacy isn't the only fallacy that exists when it comes to loot boxes. And Nielsen and his friend point out some others in their article that, in their paper, that I'd like to just quickly go over with you guys, because I kind of understand them. I mean, I could just Google them if I wanted to give you the whole rundown, but for the sake of this video, we'll just cover them briefly. Alright, so we'll start with the Gamblers Fallacy. It's pretty straightforward. Basically, how the Gamblers Fallacy works is that people who gamble, it's the mistaken belief that the more you gamble, the more the odds are going to shift into your favor. So, you know, it's very similar to the sunk cost fallacy, but it differs because it's not the investment that's driving people forward. It's kind of the mistaken belief that, you know, the odds will eventually shift in their favor. You know, it's the belief that, oh, you know, just because I flip a coin 3 times and got heads, well, you know, it's about time for a tails, when in reality it could just be heads again. And this is a fallacy that drives people to gamble, because they believe the more they gamble, the more that the odds will turn in their favor, and it's pretty much decidedly untrue. And this gambler's fallacy affects youth a lot more than adults, because youth kind of don't understand this fallacy, and they don't like recognize that statistics and probability works this way. Near misses. So if you've ever seen a slot machine, you can sometimes see like the big jackpot rewards spin by or stop just before giving you a win. Basically, that's a near miss. It's done on purpose. These are done in loot boxes too. You can get like a near miss where the item that you want kind of spins by and you miss it, and you're like, damn, you know, that was the rare one. Maybe it came so close. Maybe next time I'll win it if I play again. Losses disguised as wins. I wouldn't say that we get these in loot boxes too much, but we kind of do. Whenever you open a loot box, you're always hoping for the rare item, right? And more often than not, you win all the shitty blue items. So I would say that's kind of a loss disguised as a win. You get all these, you open the loot box, you spend like the $1.29 to open it, and you get all this blue shit that you're probably never going to use, but it's like, hey, you know, you won, you got something, when in reality, no, you lost. You got all this crap that you don't want. Cognitive entrapment, I think that's kind of what we're talking about here with the sunk cost fallacy. I think those are the same thing. If I'm wrong, correct me. And illusion of control, I can stop whenever I want to stop. I can stop opening loot boxes whenever, get off my case about it, that sort of thing. When in reality, like, you could be sucked into opening loot boxes because of any other fallacy, and you think that you can stop yourself, but really you can't. You just keep going. You keep opening. Because you're at the mercy of your own brain taking advantage of you and these companies taking advantage of you. So those are things that are at play in loot boxes that the ESRB has neglected to tell parents about. And that's not the only thing. Like, if we look at some comparisons between the psychological, like the actual dopamine response that the brain gives when it's opening a loot box compared to when it's gambling, in theory it's exactly the same. And I made this comparison in my blog post here. So basically, let's read here. Studies conducted on gambling and addiction say the anticipation phase was found to produce the largest arousal response. Psychology and Psychiatry Journal of 2019, as well as potentially being a central mechanism in the reinforcement of gambling behavior, Linnet 2014, due to the influx of dopamine during the uncertainty phase. It is almost certain that this same anticipation phase exists when opening loot boxes, just as it does when gambling. So what does this mean to the layperson? So essentially, when you open a loot box, there's that anticipation phase between when you click the button to open it and then when you win your reward. And it's the same phase that exists when you gamble. So when you pull the lever of the slot machine and the slots start spinning, you anticipate and you wait for them to slot into place. And it's this waiting phase that your brain really likes. And during this waiting phase, your brain gets this rush of dopamine. Now, what dopamine is, it's basically a drug that your brain releases naturally, and it makes you feel good. Dopamine releases when you do all sorts of things, eat food, have sex, play video games, probably, if that makes you feel good. But when it comes to addiction, dopamine is considered, in some theories, a reason why people can become addicted to just about anything, because they feel good doing that sort of thing. Let's see, for example, people who do cliff diving, they get that rush of dopamine from taking their life in their own hands, kind of doing that sort of thing. And they can kind of become addicted to that rush, that feeling. And the same thing can happen with, arguably, from the theory, just about anything that gives you dopamine. So you can become addicted to opening loot boxes, in theory, because you get that dopamine rush during the anticipation phase. And it's pretty powerful. I don't know, when I was a kid, I remember opening loot boxes in Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and I didn't go crazy, obviously, but I remember, there really was this kind of force in the back of my brain that was like, hey, you should open some more. So this is information that the ESRB is not telling parents, has decided to not include all of this, what I would deem irrevocably important information about loot boxes and their negative effects on children and their negative effects on teenagers and basically their negative effects in general. They're just fucking shitty. They're basically gambling, but because you can't sell shit, they're not, which is so technical and legal, and they still have pretty much the exact same fallacies and the exact same manipulative structure that gambling does, and I think they're just as dangerous. And even if they are slightly less dangerous and science figures that out, they should still be considered predatory, because really they're taking advantage of people from a psychological standpoint. And if people aren't aware of these fallacies And if parents aren't aware, then children could be sucked into this because the children aren't aware, and the children are being like restricted. Parents aren't like, hey, you can't buy loot boxes. And then you get a case where kids spend tens of thousands of dollars in like FIFA, and it's because the parents didn't restrict the loot boxes. True, but like what are these loot boxes doing in a game that's rated for kids in the first place? You know what I'm saying? So I'll read what I wrote in the blog here. Paid loot boxes have a buy-in, like gambling. They have the potential to psychologically manipulate and foster addiction, like gambling. But because they do not have a cash out, they are not gambling? I understand why hesitation exists to classify buying something with a random, fiscally valueless reward gambling, but evidence is mounting to support that these seemingly harmless mechanisms have the potential to be just as dangerous as gambling. If not defined as gambling, they should be recognized as predatory and exploitative, as King and Delfabbro suggest. Just because a dragon is toothless doesn't mean he won't breathe fire. So yes, this is what the ESRB is lying about. They are lying by omission. They have not included this information to parents. They are trying to play loot boxes off as treasure chests, that they're this kid-friendly thing that you can just purchase, and it's totally fine. It's totally fine that it uses a random reward mechanism, when in reality, as we have seen here, if it's not gambling, at the very least, it's predatory, and it should not be in games with an E rating. So parents, now that you know the truth after watching this video, I'd recommend you share this video with anyone that you think this is pertinent with. I know I made some bold claims in this video, and I know that the evidence I'm working off of is theoretical, but I mean, it's so similar that when studies do come out, it's almost certain that they will find that loot boxes are akin to gambling and are gambling. But that remains to be seen. It sucks that there's not enough studies to prove that they are yet, but Judgment Day is coming. Anyway, thank you guys for watching this video. Hope you learned something. If you have any questions, just leave them to me in the comments down below. I'll answer them. And yeah, thank you, and I hope you have yourself a wonderful day.